It's the year 1937, and for the past 2 years, Amelia Earhart has been traveling the globe, attempting to circumnavigate the Earth and become the first person ever to do so. Her trip has taken her from Oakland, California, where it began, all over the Pacific, and back again. But she's not alone on this adventure. Along for the ride is her navigator, Fred Noonan. As they left Papua New Guinea, their destination was the tiny island of Howland in the Indian Ocean. But as they flew over the endless expanse of water, something went terribly wrong. Soon, their radio communications became weak and confused, and then silence. Amelia's plane never arrived, and there would be no sign of her or Fred anywhere on the island. They had vanished into thin air. This was the beginning of one of the greatest mysteries of the 20th century. This is the disappearance of Amelia Earhart. Hi everyone, welcome to Best Hidden America. Before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss an exciting episode. Also, stick around after the video for more amazing stories. There's probably not a soul on planet Earth who hasn't heard of Amelia. Even nearly a century after her disappearance, her name echoes throughout the annals of time and her legacy lives on. Born in Atchison, Kansas, on July 1897, Amelia developed a passion for flying at a very young age. When she was just 10 years old, she attended an air show where she saw a biplane for the first time and immediately fell in love. This moment sparked a lifelong obsession, and she spent the next several decades breaking barriers and smashing records. By 1928, she had already become the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. 2 years later, she set a world record by flying from Hawaii to California in under 18 hours. And in 1935, she became the first person to fly solo from Honolulu to Oakland. All these accomplishments made her one of the most famous people in the world, and newspapers across the country would print updates about her daily life. But as popular as she was, Amelia was also seen as a bit of a tomboy, and people often criticized her lifestyle. Many thought that a woman should focus on being a good little housewife, rather than going off and flying airplanes. But this only made Amelia even more determined. If people didn't think she could do something, she would prove them wrong. And there was no better way to do that than by circumnavigating the globe. But it wasn't just Amelia's thirst for adventure that drove her to complete this journey. It was also her desire to inspire other women to follow their dreams. In a time when society expected women to stay at home, Amelia showed them that they could do anything they set their minds to. Every time she broke a new record, she proved that women were just as capable as men and that they could achieve anything if they believed in themselves. On June 1st, 1937, Amelia took off from Oakland, California, and began her journey around the world. She planned to make stops along the way to refuel and get her bearings. And after a few weeks, she and Fred Noonan reached Papua New Guinea. Now they needed to cross the vast expanse of the Indian Ocean and reach their final destination. This would be the longest leg of their journey, covering more than 2,500 miles. And because of this, they decided to take a break before beginning the journey. On July, they left their camp and headed to the airfield. It was here that they boarded their Lockheed Electra and prepared for takeoff. Their plan was to fly from Papua New Guinea to Howland Island, a tiny coral atoll in the Indian Ocean. But getting there wouldn't be easy. The two pilots had to fly over thousands of miles of open ocean, where there was very little chance of finding land. If something went wrong with the Electra, they might as well kiss survival goodbye. With this in mind, the pair contacted nearby radio stations to let them know of their flight path and when they should arrive. Then, with the engines roaring, they pointed the Electra towards the endless horizon and disappeared into the clouds. Somewhere over the Pacific. July turned into one of the longest days of Amelia's life, and as the sun began to set, the Electra flew over the Marshall Islands. Here, the group of islands that Amelia had hoped to reach, somewhere between Papua New Guinea and Howland Island. At this point, She was running low on fuel, but she assumed that if she pushed through the night, she would be able to reach the island chain by morning. But unfortunately, things didn't go according to plan. The Electra struggled through the sky, and it became obvious that they would need to make an emergency landing. Although Amelia desperately searched the darkness for an island, there was nothing but endless ocean around them. She knew that she and Fred might not make it. And with this realization came a sudden burst of clarity. She understood now why people had tried so hard to warn her against this journey. The dangers of flying were great, and no amount of fame or glory could overcome that. But Amelia had come too far to turn back now. She knew that she had to do everything in her power to save herself and Fred. So she took a deep breath and focused on the task at hand. With shaking hands, she guided the Electra towards the water, and as the plane hit the surface of the ocean, she braced for impact. The waves crashed over the Electra, threatening to drag the plane down into the depths. But Amelia fought back, refusing to let the ocean claim her as its own. She had come too far to give up now, but unfortunately, despite her best efforts, the plane began to sink. Amelia watched in horror as the waves tossed the Electra like a toy, slowly but surely dragging it down into the darkness. She could see the fear on Fred's face and knew that he was just as desperate as she was. Together, they struggled to escape the sinking plane, and once free, they clung to each other in the darkness, trying to keep their heads above the water. For a moment, it seemed as though they might make it, but then the cold, unforgiving ocean began to take its toll. The two pilots grew weaker and weaker until finally they were pulled under the waves. The Electra, with its broken wings and shattered fuselage, sank to the bottom of the ocean, taking the hopes and dreams of millions with it. For months, the US Navy and Coast Guard scoured thousands of miles of ocean in search of Amelia and Fred. They combed through aerial photographs, interviewed witnesses, and followed up on every possible lead. But despite their best efforts, they never found any trace of the missing aviators. In the end, the only thing that was recovered was a piece of the Electra's fuselage and a woman's shoe. Even though the official search was called off after a few weeks, people still wondered what had happened to Amelia and Fred. Was the Electra's disappearance really an accident, or was there something more to the story? One of the most popular theories is that the Electra crashed into the ocean after running out of gas. This is supported by the fact that the last radio transmission from the plane indicated that they were low on fuel, and the Coast Guard did find a piece of the Electra's fuselage near Howland Island. However, some people believe that the Electra actually landed in the Marshall Islands, and that Amelia and Fred were captured by the Japanese. This theory is supported by the fact that the Japanese were known to be in the area at the time, and there are unconfirmed reports that they had spotted the Electra. Others believe that the two pilots managed to land the plane on a remote island, but they didn't survive for long. This theory is supported by some bone fragments that were found on the island of but these bones were never positively identified as human. Even though we may never know exactly what happened to Amelia and Fred, we can be grateful that they lived their lives on their own terms. Amelia was a true pioneer for women in aviation, and she will never be forgotten. So, what do you think happened to Amelia Earhart? Do you think she crashed at sea? Was she captured by the Japanese, or did she survive in silence? The truth may still be waiting beneath the wave. Nearly a century later, the disappearance of Amelia Earhart remains unsolved. But one thing is for sure, her legacy lives on. From the shores of Howland Island to the skies above Atchison, Kansas, Amelia's story continues to inspire generations of adventurers and dreamers. If you want more legendary stories like this, subscribe to Best Hidden America and join us as we uncover history's greatest mysteries. Until then, stay safe out there, explorers, because some secrets are best left